During this interview episode, you'll meet and learn from my CPA, Meg K. Wheeler, owner of the Equitable Money Project and host of the Disrupt Your Money podcast. And no, we are not just talking about accounting, so take your finger off that skip button right now. While you're probably a little shy to express your political opinions or disrupt the status quo in your industry, listen in for advice on how speaking out about your beliefs actually sets you apart from the rest of your competition and magnetizes your ideal client toward you. Meg shares 3 valuable questions she and her team use constantly to determine offers, initiatives, marketing, and ultimately how her most valuable resources, time and energy, are spent. I highly recommend you use these 3 questions in your business too, because they'll help ensure you're taking steps toward your most abundant life. Meg, thank you so much for being here with me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's just start off with hearing your own personal definition of abundance.
When I think about abundance, the first word that actually comes to mind is choice. I think abundance is about being able to make choices and not feeling like you have to do something. I have to, miss my child's event because I have to work, or I have to, and it's not to say that there aren't ever going to be things in life that we have to do. Of course there are, but I think abundance is about filling your life with enough balance, enough support, enough resources, enough calm, enough excitement that in most of what you do, you have choice and you can make the choice to do something that fills you up or that supports yourself, your health, that supports your family, and that you're not feeling stuck or trapped in most of what you do. So I don't know, I think that for me feels abundant.
Talk to me about how you've infused those personal definitions of not feeling trapped, of having choices into creating a business and your current lifestyle. Was this all super intentional the entire way, or did you feel like you got off track sometimes? Or when you did get off track, did you have some like wake up moment and you're like, this isn't what I designed? Like, talk to me about that intention of pulling those pieces of abundance into your life.
Well, let's be clear. I think every business owner gets off track. I don't think I know a single person who has never gotten off track. Has it always been intentional? Absolutely not. I mean, when I first started my business, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I think I knew what I wanted my life to look like, but even that definition then, I think is very different from what I really wanted. I just didn't realize it yet. I think what's helped me the most is I'm always asking the question, does it have to be this way? And I think very often when we build businesses, or even just in life, we're taught this is the way to do something. And oftentimes we then go make choices and decisions based on believing that that's the way we have to do it. This certainly plays in for me. I mean, I got a college degree and I went and got a job and I thought I'd have that job forever and I thought I'd build my career until I woke up one day and said, does it have to be this way? It just didn't feel right for me. And I didn't think I could do anything about that because I had been told that's what you do. And especially when we are building businesses, we're taught that these are the ways you need to do it. But what we often do a lot in our business and in my personal life is ask that question and then change it. So, for example, we just had a team call right before this, and we talked about how some of the things we're doing in the business right now are really sapping my energy. And we asked that question, do we have to do it this way? And the answer, of course, is no, we don't. And so we're reworking things so that it's going to look differently moving forward. And I think by asking yourself that question in all aspects of your life, you are allowing yourself to then welcome in abundance because you are allowing your life to work for you and not the way that somebody prescribed for you. And I think that's so critical when we're trying to build these lives.
And that question of, does this have to be this way? I think you've used in multiple aspects of your life. You've ran for office, you've been vocal politically. And I do want to get into that just a little bit because, from my perspective, so often the advice that we get is like, don't make anybody mad, don't ruffle feathers, don't necessarily like speak your mind. There's going to be people who won't become your clients because they disagree with you. And then the other side of that coin is like, maybe you don't want them as clients because your values don't align, and maybe you should speak out. So, walk us through that process a little bit.
From a purely moral perspective, if I'm not speaking out, then I'm not doing what is right for me. So there wasn't any question when it came to that. But talking about from a business perspective, yes, there is that advice a lot. We don't want to take a side. We don't want to, get in the middle, ruffle any feathers, as you say. I don't know. I hate that advice. I mean, I think if you want to take that advice because that genuinely is how you want to run your business, and that's fine. But I would say one of our biggest assets is actually where we stand on things. And I think if you asked our clients and the folks in our community, probably 90% of them would say we work with them because of where they stand. I think if you're going to run a business, we're always talking about in business how to differentiate yourself, how to stand out. If I'm not pissing people off, then I am absolutely doing something wrong, because I am not making it clear who we want to work with and how we want to work with you and why we're doing the work we're doing. And that why is such a critical part. I mean, we're all about accessible financial education, and we're all about wealth building, especially for marginalized entrepreneurs. We talk about that in everything we do. So if that's not something that is a part of your mission too, then we're just not the right fit for you. And we don't want you to give us your money. We want you to find someone that is aligned with what you're looking to accomplish. To me, it's a no brainer, but I get how it can feel hard because, again, you're told you have to do it this way. And there's that fear of, will I make money? Will I be able to feed my family? Did I make a huge mistake leaving my job to start this business if I can't get clients? And so you feel fear around not doing it the way people tell you have to.
Have you ever pictured yourself hosting your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we'd like to do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping independent financial service professionals launch and grow their podcasts since 2019. I coach you through branding, establishing structure and workflow, strategy, and recording your episodes. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Elevate your brand's visibility, become more approachable, and attract potential clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show. Was there ever a time when you look back and you think, oh, like I wasn't as outspoken back then because it was the first 3 years of my business, or I just didn't have the confidence yet? Or can you kind of guide new business owners through what your journey looked like and where you think, hey, this was the right moment to do XYZ?
It's a great question. And I'll be completely honest. I think that moment is actually happening now for us. We have been very quiet on the conflict, the Israeli Hamas Gaza conflict. And to give you a sense of why or what the thought process was around that, it's because I don't feel educated enough. And I haven't been able to find the right words to communicate. And I think when we have a platform it's really important that we think about how we're using our voice, and not to the extent that it holds you back from speaking out. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to say things that don't land the way we want them to, or we're going to change our minds as we grow and we gain more education. But I do also think there is sometimes this feeling like you have to say something. And I don't think that that's actually the worthwhile way to go if what you're saying doesn't add value to the conversation, especially when you are coming from a place of privilege, as I am, as someone who's white and someone who has socioeconomic privilege. And so it's really important to think about, what am I adding to the conversation? Sometimes what you're adding is merely just support. It is just a white person with privilege standing up and saying this isn't okay. But it's important to understand what that is. And it's also important to come from a place of honesty and being genuine about something. And if you can't figure out how, or coming from a place of genuine activism, then you're harming the people that you're claiming to be in support of so much more. So I think there's that piece to it. As for new business owners thinking about how to speak out, maybe you start with one issue. So instead of feeling like you have to say something on everything, in fact, I'll give you an example. I remember I had, this was personal, not business, but when the war in Ukraine started, I had a neighbor who knows I'm very politically outspoken come over and say, I'm upset. I don't understand. You have nothing for Ukraine in your yard, because I have a lot of political signs in my yard on a rotating basis. And I said to them, I said, let me be very clear. I'm appalled at what's going on. I'm horrified. I'm caring very deeply. Here are the actions that I'm taking. But there are wars going on all over the world every single day. And if I put a sign out for every war, my yard would literally be covered in signs. And that's not helping. Again, I go back to, is this adding to the conversation? That wouldn't be helping the conversation. What is are the actions I'm doing over here, and I listed the different ways that I was involved. So for new business owners, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. There's so much going on in the world. Do I speak out on everything? How do I even get started? Pick one thing that you care very deeply about and talk about that. And just start there. And you don't have to go out, guns blazing about it. You can go out and say, I'm really bothered by this thing. I'm really concerned about this thing. You can even say, I don't know exactly where I stand on it, or here's what I think, is where I stand, and make it a conversation. It doesn't have to be some bold political statement. But even just starting to have those conversations can be really important. As you well know, I write a lot of emails that talk about politics and that talk about the different issues. And I get folks who respond. And that has brought on some really great conversations that have helped deepen my knowledge about issues, that have helped me reframe how I think about things. So there's a lot of value in just starting the conversation and opening that door to it, without feeling like you have to be this political activist for someone to think that you care.
I'll put my hand up and say I was drawn to you specifically because of your perspectives and views and outspokenness and what your business stands for in a very like upfront, on the front page type of way. We were in a group together that supports, minorities and underprivileged entrepreneurs and just helps them grow businesses, right? But then even within that, you're developing relationships with the ladies in the groups. And even beyond that, I have relationships with various financial practitioners, tons of CPAs, bookkeepers, all of these people. But you stood out to me so much because of your business and the messaging and then your individual outspokenness. And so that was just very attractive to me. I was like, this is somebody who stands for something, who cares and is willing to even put your own personal reputation on the line because of what you stand for. And that's attractive. And so I would just encourage business owners to not shy away from maybe find someone who's doing it well and take notes. And then, like you said, speak out on like one issue at a time. So Anyways, I thought that was important to touch on because you do serve such a very specific group of entrepreneurs with your CPA services. So, on that note, we've been working together actually for a couple of years, and I've had great revenue years and I've had low revenue years. And I have no idea if this is something that all CPAs do or not, but you specifically have taken time where you've brainstormed revenue increasing activities with me. Like, find this list of podcasts and maybe you can reach out to their guests and just different, like solid, just brainstorming that I really needed at the time. And so, could you share a little bit more about your services specifically? And if you're doing that with, people on a consistent basis, or how have you structured your business differently? Because I feel like there's a very different structure here.
The best way to think about what we do is we really have two buckets. We have our financial education bucket, which lives under our brand Equitable Money Project. And that is where we provide accessible financial education, everything from, worksheets and templates to a course and a membership, and really everything that goes beyond just the tax returns to actually learning about the stuff you're talking about. How do I make more money? How do I price what I'm offering? How do I pay myself? How do I hire a team and pay them? How do I manage cash flow? All of those sort of more CFO type activities. We also then, of course, have the done for you services. And that started with tax prep and has grown. It includes bookkeeping, it includes strategy and consulting, like what you're talking about. And really, the reason we have done it that way, it's funny because when people ask me what I do, I never say I do taxes. And I rarely even say I'm a CPA. To me, I'm a financial guide, I'm a financial educator. I'm really there to support you in all of the different areas of your life that touch money. And that's pretty much everything if you think about it. So we wanted to create something that supported business owners comprehensively and didn't just fill out their tax forms, but going back to our mission of an equitable society, we wanted to support marginalized business owners in creating wealth and doing it in an equitable way. And that is why we've structured things the way we've structured them, so that, yeah, anybody can fill out your tax forms. But we're going to talk about how do you actually grow that business? How do you actually set things up yourself so that you can optimize them for ultimate wealth building? Because the more wealth we can put in your hands, the more we can use our voices, the bigger platforms we can get, and the more change we can affect.
That is so beautiful. When you started your CPA firm, right? Did you start out with all of these offerings, or did you start out like, okay, we're doing tax returns and then you could see the need for these different spaces, or how did that evolve?
I actually had a different business. It was a physical products business. I learned that I did not love doing physical products. But in that, I was talking to a lot of folks, or I'd be in Facebook groups and people would ask questions about the financial side of things. And I would either know the answer and just offer it up because I knew the answer, or I would get frustrated by the answers people were getting, that they just weren't accurate or they weren't helpful. So I started to reach out to folks and offer. I actually didn't want to do taxes at all. I didn't want to touch tax returns. And the funny thing is, in my career, I rarely did tax returns. I was international tax was my background. So I did a lot of tax strategy. I worked with a lot of companies to set up their worldwide operations in a tax-friendly way. So doing individual tax returns wasn't at all what I did. And I didn't really want to do it. I didn't want to fill out tax forms. So I started by offering strategy calls with folks, and I would answer their questions about the finances in their business, but I wasn't actually going to do anything for them in terms of done for you services. And then, I was trying to figure out, well, how do I build this? I want to move away from physical products. So what does that look like? What's that next step? And I kept butting up against the fact that people needed someone to do their taxes. So a coach of mine said, just throw the offer out there and see what happens. And if you hate it, you don't do it ever again. No big deal. And I did. And I think the first year, I think we got 40 or 50 clients. And I was like, oh, okay, I think we're on to something here. So that's really where it started. And at the time, we offered both an annual package where we supported you throughout the year with your quarterly estimates and with calls and all of that. We also offered just taxes. And we had that for a few years. And just this past year, actually retired the tax prep only portion, because what we found was that the folks we worked with where we just did their taxes, by the time they came to us to do their returns, we really couldn't help them. The year was over. So any strategy or optimization, that opportunity was gone, at least for that year. And we wanted to change the narrative around what business owners in particular should be doing when it comes to taxes, and that it should be much more forward looking than backwards looking. And so by retiring our tax prep only, we've really been able to focus on our annual clients and do more of that proactive planning than we were able to do before. So, but that evolved over, I think, 4 or 5 years now we're into it. And so it didn't start big like where it is. It started by just throwing something out there, seeing if it stuck, and then modifying it as we learned what worked, what we didn't like, what our people needed, and we'll continue to do that work. By the way, that work doesn't end. We're already talking about things we're going to modify for next year's package. So it's a constant process,
Constant reiteration,
mm-hmm.
and I don't want to say trial and error, but kind of.
It is. I
Well,
mean,
so
being an entrepreneur is constant trial and error. Yeah.
keep speaking to the service-based business aspect of that, and with knowledge that most listeners are going to be business owners in a financial services-based business of some type. They could be very interested in doing something like what you're doing, or they could be a financial advisor or a coach or a bookkeeper, like, any financial service-based business owner. I know you have insight to the back end of so many people's businesses. We often, as service-based business owners, get kind of stuck in the done for you. This is taking all my time. You mentioned at the top of our call, like, this is taking all of my energy and it doesn't feel good. How can we better navigate some of those signs in our finances and feelings in ourselves as a business owner of getting kind of out of that, I'm serving my life away at this business?
I mean, I think it goes back to the question of, does it have to be this way? And before you ask that question, asking the question of, does this work for me? And I was giving the example yesterday we do a Smart Steps to Zero debt program that we're running, which I'm really excited about. It's going great. And I was talking yesterday about how I had gotten in this habit of every Sunday night sitting down and working through my personal finances. And for the last few months, it's just fallen off. And I've missed Sunday nights and I haven't done it. And I'm getting behind. And then I've got to catch up and it takes hours. And it just wasn't working. And I was beating myself up and, oh, I'm such a slacker. And why isn't this working? And then I finally asked myself the question, why isn't it working? Like, maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's just the way I've set it up. And what I realized is that by Sunday night, the time Sunday night rolls around, I'm tired. The last thing I want to do is look at my money. It doesn't feel like a good way to start the week. And I've now switched it to Thursday afternoons, and it's made all the difference. And it sounds silly and obvious, but to ask yourself those questions, like, is this actually working for me? And what do I need to tweak so that it does work for me? And then that's where you lead into that question of, does it have to be this way, right? We talked about the fact that my business cannot grow because I can only take on so many clients. And so we've had to look at ways to grow it that doesn't require more of my time. Things like our Smart Steps to Zero debt program, where we have a lot of resources to guide you. We're relaunching Biz Money Blueprint, which is our kind of Biz Money 101 course, if you will, how to get everything set up. And thinking about ways that we can support people that doesn't actually require my time. And so I think another question we ask a lot in the business, anytime we're going to set up an offer or implement a new program or whatever it might be, we ask, does this have to be done with us? Does this have to involve our time? Or is there a way that we can change it? I'll give you another example back to our Smart Steps to Zero program. this first round, this is the first time we've done this program, and I've been creating custom debt plans for people, which is great, super helpful. But as I'm sitting there doing these plans, I'm thinking, wait a second, I don't have to be the one to do this. I've already got a workbook. I can tweak it in a few ways so that the next round of folks can just enter their own info and get the answer. They don't need me. I can cut myself out of this. And it's asking yourself that question in everything you do that opens up that opportunity to rework it in a way, still delivers the same value and the same support, but doesn't require you actually doing the work. And even if you love being a service-based business owner, or you have an agency model or whatever it may be, and you know that's where you're going to stay, you don't want to change your model, you still need to be thinking about how do you evolve it. I'm going to say it will never grow if you don't. Some people might say, I don't care if it grows. I like the size we're at. That's okay. But sometimes growth isn't financial. It's growth in freedom of time. It's growth in knowing that the resources are there if you had to step away for, for medical emergency or for death in the family, or just because you want to take a sabbatical, whatever it might be. So growth can be thought of differently, but that growth cannot exist if you have to show up every single day and do every piece of it. And so really challenging yourself to think about, how do I change that model and still deliver on the service we're providing?
That is such good advice. And I even recently have kind of divided my time into 4 quadrants. And some would argue there's a fifth quadrant because, and, I'm talking about like work time. Okay. Like obviously there is family time, rest, things like that. And that is very important. But work time, 1 quadrant is new client acquisition, 1 quadrant is marketing, 1 quadrant is current client service, touch points, quarterly calls, that type of thing. And then the other quadrant is processes and systems. So if every week I can touch all 4 of those categories in my business, there's not one that's just fallen off, right? Like I haven't just focused all my time on serving clients and processes and then done zero marketing or new client acquisition, because that could lead to this feast or famine cycle. And so I've been really focused on that. And the fifth quadrant that some might argue is like a personal development piece. I do a ton of personal development, but I don't consider that as part of like what I do in my office. Usually I'm in the kitchen when I'm reading a book and I'm having coffee, and it's like I really enjoy that personal development because I'm a goof like that. But so I don't consider that as like in my office at my desk go time, right? So do you divide your time similarly, or how have you, as an owner, right? How have you decided, I don't do this, I do this. Here are the important categories of my time. I know you have a team. I know you have a family. Like, share with us a little bit about how you manage that.
Well, I'm still figuring that out, and it's changed as the business has changed. And I think that's the important thing. And again, this is why we ask that question of, does this work? And maybe we should say, does this still work for me? Because as our businesses evolve, things do change, and what worked 2 years ago doesn't work today. I like your bucket idea. I think about, I guess I sort of do a similar thing where I have days. So Tuesdays and Wednesdays are always client calls, things like podcast interviews, events, trainings, anywhere where I'm going to be on camera. And I block those days back to back to back to back. They're intense days, but it's 2 days a week. And what's great is when I finish the day, I can just go home and crash and be with my family, and I'm good. I tend to find that if I sprinkle things, I get distracted. I have trouble getting back to my focus. So that works for me. It might not work for somebody else. Mondays and Thursdays are my super productive work days. No calls, no meetings, head down, getting the work done. And then I try to take Fridays off every week. Doesn't always work, but that's the goal. So I do think about it in that way. But again, I'm constantly having to reevaluate it. Now, I will say one tool that's been hugely helpful for me in my business is it's a very simple spreadsheet. Anyone can make this themselves. I sit down and I list every single task that I do. And then I have, let's see, what is it, 4 or 5 columns. So one column is only I can do this. One column is my existing team can do this. The next column is this is something someone else could do that doesn't exist in our world right now. They're not currently a contractor or employee, but we could get that person. So kind of our outsource column. And then I have another column for automate. So things that nobody needs to do and we can automate. And actually, it is five. So the fifth column is actually because of someone in our community who said, you also need a column for nobody or anybody needs to do this. Get rid of it completely. And I said, that's absolutely right. The put it in the trash can column, because it's not something anybody, tool or person, needs to do. And I try to do that exercise. I'd love to say you should do it every quarter. Admittedly, I probably only do it about twice a year. Anytime I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's a really helpful tool to pull out, because inevitably I always find things that I go, wait a second, I don't need to be doing that. And oftentimes it's as simple as handing it to a team member, or automating it. Just, there's usually, for a lot of the stuff, there's a quick answer, but it's really helpful to show me what isn't working.
I love the structure of this. I mean, I think my mind works in spreadsheet, as does yours. And I know some people's doesn't, but I've done a similar exercise, but I love the structure of this. So thank you very much for providing that for us. Let's jump over and talk about marketing and your podcast a little bit. So, share with us when your podcast idea came about and why, and what launching your podcast looked like. And sure, share logistics if you want, but also the values, the purpose, the intention behind it. And was it intentionally like, I'm going to attract people to my business with my podcast? Or was it like, I have stuff to say, which I think for you is both.
So the podcast is called Disrupt Your Money, and it's all about really the things we've been talking about. It's designed for business owners, but you don't have to be a business owner to get something from it. As I said earlier, pretty much all aspects of our lives touch money. So we talk about a lot of stuff, but it's really all about how we can disrupt the current money and wealth building systems, to seek that equitable wealth society that we want. It is the third podcast I've had. I had one in my prior product-based business called One for Womankind, which was all about women-owned businesses and supporting women and all of that. And then I had a podcast called Elected, which when I was running for office, which tracked our journey for office and was all about just regular folks running for office. So starting a podcast wasn't a brand new concept for me. I think I always knew that I had a lot to say, and a podcast would be a good medium for me to do that in the business. I think we probably came up with the idea a couple of years ago. And because I had background in having podcasts, it was fairly easy for us to get off the ground. Although I will say, for anyone listening, it's fairly easy for anyone to get off the ground, because you really don't need much. You don't need all the fancy gear or any of that to get started. And it grew from there. And yes, I think the idea was always to create a place for people to hear my voice and really hear our mission and our values come through. And it was also a place to be able to have conversations that were less tactical. We've got trainings on setting up your accounting system and all of that, but we wanted to actually have conversations on the inequity, on wealth building, and taking things to a deeper level than we could in our regular trainings. But we also did see it as a lead generating tool, as a way for people to get introduced to the business and to our community. And so I think it's done a great job of that for us, because it gives people a way to really see that we are different.
I agree. The cover art is different. The name is different. Like, it really does make you stand out. And your cover art specifically is one of the few that I'm actually drawn to that doesn't truly have someone's face on it. The typical advice for cover art is to put the host's face on there. We want to see someone who we're establishing a relationship with in our ears, or if you're doing a video podcast. But yours specifically makes so much sense because of your mission and your message and all of those things. So, for anybody listening, yeah, you have to go look at Meg's cover art and check it out.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We had a wonderful podcast person before we knew you who helped us with it, but we kept pushing back. We just kept saying, it's not right, it's not right, it's not right. And then I had seen this graphic and of the sort of the people, and I thought that's it. We need, and we modified it for our purpose. But yeah, so thank you.
Like you said, it's this graphic of the people, right? And there are various, I think, like hairstyles and colors and whatever. It's obviously like this multicultural group of women. And yeah, it fits. It really fits. And I think that's the overarching advice, right? Not just for cover art, but this is one space where the typical advice may or may not always apply to you. And you have to judge if you're going to follow that or not, or if you want to be different in that way. Tell me, how has the podcast helped support your business? Has it been just a great conversational point? Has it actually attracted clients? Like, what have you seen as the podcast host for your business?
I will say, I think we'd probably have even better results if we were more consistent with it. It admittedly has been one of those things that we've sort of, gone back and forth with as the business has, gotten busy and evolved so much. But I think, yes, at a minimum, it's been a great conversation piece and conversation place. It has enabled us to bring in folks from other communities and have conversations that at a soulful level connects us to those people, but also from a marketing perspective connects us to their audiences. And that's been really helpful and huge for us. I think it's also, again, just added some dimension to the work we're already doing. You mentioned earlier, you go on our website, it's obvious where we stand. And yes, absolutely it is. But we're still talking about accounting systems and bank accounts and taxes. So it's, people are going to get a sense of us, but we're not necessarily going super deep into our values and the impact of inequity in every conversation that we're having in our programs. And so the podcast allows us to do that. And I think it not only gives people a better sense of who we are, but also creates a space for them to participate in these conversations, even if just as a listener, because not enough of these conversations, I think, are happening outside of the political world at this depth.
Of course, having your own platform gives you a lot of freedom with what you want to say, can say, who you want to have on, all of those things. So, share with us for a sec, how do you manage your podcast and balance that with the business? I mean, I know you've said like, oh, we should be more consistent. Everybody feels that way. Okay. There are ebbs and flows with business, just the same as with marketing. You can say, like, oh, I'm going to do Facebook ads this year. And like 6 months in, you're like, I'm going to take these Facebook ads down. Like, things change, right? That's fine. But how have you, in alignment with your values of time, resources, choice, how have you managed both the podcast and the business?
It's a great question. And I don't know that I have a great answer to it because I think the answer is I haven't always managed both. Right now, I very much feel like I'm in a season where I'm struggling with what to say. Sometimes my brain just sort of says, we're going on a bit of a break. And oftentimes that will happen after a period where I've really been very vocal. Oftentimes it'll happen in a period where I know I'm about to be very vocal, like the year that we happen to be in with the election. So, I think when I have those times, I really honor that and say the podcast is just not going to be a priority right now because I know that if I force it, it's not going to have the impact that we want it to have. That I think has really been a learning growth process for us is not forcing content of any kind in the business. The first few years it was, okay, we have to do this many social media, posts, and we have to do this email, blah, blah, blah. And we're now at a place where, last week was a holiday week for us when we're recording this, and we didn't get our Monday email out. I just didn't write it. I didn't get to it. And my community and content manager was on vacation. And I just said, you know what? It's okay. We're not going to stress about it. We're not going to rush to force something out because that just wouldn't have served anybody, especially us and our team. And if we're not well served, we're not going to be able to serve our community well. So I think that's what you have to do anytime you're creating a big content project like a podcast is get honest and real about what you can do and what works for you and what helps you serve your people the best, which has to factor in your own health and energy and processes. And that's what we've tried to do.
A big conversation that I have often is about batching content and planning ahead and doing solo episodes to fill in the gaps between interviews so that you're not stressed that you didn't schedule an interview. And then solo episodes being an important part of maintaining your own authority on your show. Have there been adjustments? And yeah, I'm sure there have, but have there been adjustments in your content structure or any like very specific, like pinpointable details that you started this way, it changed, 6 months down the road, a year down the road? What could you share with us on that?
For my first two podcasts, they were 30 to 45-minute episodes, lots of talking. Of course, lots of talking. It's a podcast, but lots of me talking. There were lots of guests, and they just felt really heavy. And when we went into Disrupt Your Money, in fact, this was right before we started it. I hadn't even decided I was going to start a podcast because I kept thinking, I want to have a podcast, but sometimes podcasting feels really heavy to me and really sucking that energy. And then I was actually listening to a podcast called So Money, which is by Farnoosh Torabi, who's a big financial content creator. And I loved the format that she took, which was very much these mini segments. So a couple of minutes talking about this one topic, a couple of minutes switching to this, then some listener questions. And as I was listening to it, I thought, gosh, this just feels so much lighter. I like the way she's doing this. This feels more manageable. So when we started Disrupt Your Money, we decided two things. Number one, our episodes were going to be 20 minutes and no more. I have a very short attention span. I knew that when I listen to podcasts, unless it's a story-based podcast, it's very hard for me to sit and listen to 45 plus minutes of a podcast. So we wanted to do that. And then the second piece was we're going to do these little segments. It feels a lot lighter to write that content. I don't have to sit down and write 45 minutes about, financial inequity. I can write a 3-minute, monologue, and then I can answer questions for 5 minutes. And I hope our listeners like it. I think they do, but I like it. And it feels so much more doable and manageable. And it takes so much less energy from me. So I'm able to show up better for each of the segments than I think I ever would. And while we do have guests, we probably, I would say it's a 50-50 ratio of guests, no guests, or maybe even a little bit less. Because when we do have those guests, it's not a segment style, it's an interview style or conversational style. And as much as I enjoy it, and I love those conversations, they take a lot of my energy. And so we really have to think about, I think everyone has to, if you're going to do a podcast, needs to think about, again, what works best for you.
Well, and I think the big kind of secret there that went unsaid is that there is no one right way, best formula, perfect length. Like those are some of the questions I get still all the time. And the biggest advice that I have is just like, there are no rules. Do whatever you want. Like, what makes you happy? What feels good? Because ultimately, you touched on this. Like, if it feels good to you, if you like it and your attention span is held, then that's how it's going to work for your clients or your audience. And then that's also how you're going to maintain this show over the long term. So I think that's super, super valuable advice. Thank you. Okay, so one more time, share with us about your show, drop the links for your business, and tell us where we can follow you.
So the podcast is Disrupt Your Money, disruptyourmoney.com. It's on every podcast player that you can probably think of. Our website is equitablemoneyproject.com. And as we're coming up on the turn of the year and tax season, you can, of course, get on our wait list to work with us. We open up spots every December for our annual package, and you can do that at equitablemoneyproject.com/tax. But if you go to our website or follow us on social media, we've got lots of great free resources as well to help you in your biz money journey. So thank you so much for letting me be here and letting us share all about what we do.
Thank you so much for being on. I love what you're doing. We'll continue to be a fan. So thank you.